Thumbs up that we are ready to go. So good evening. Welcome to the new school year of 2018-2019. I can't believe I'm saying that, but I'm going to call to order the first official meeting of the new school year of the Wilmington School Committee. Our first order of business, if you could join me, and we're setting our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we jump into our pretty robust agenda this evening, I just wanted to mention a couple of things. We've just been made aware that there is a medical emergency at Silver Lake, and I just want to offer our care and concern to the individuals that might be involved. I understand it's an unfolding situation. Also, we have some introductions to be made this evening. First of all, I'd like to officially welcome Dr. Glenn Brand, our new superintendent. Thank you. Who's joining us officially this evening. We also have Dr. Brian Regan, our new Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Staff Development. And we also are lucky to have a new school committee member. Welcome, Ms. Jono House. Thank you. All righty, jumping right into our items for vote by consensus. We've got quite a long list, as typical this time of year, so bear with me. The first item for approval is the approval of the minutes of June 27, 2018 regular session. Can I have a motion to approve those minutes, please? Mrs. Bryson, seconded. Mr. Bjork, thank you. All those in favor? Okay, there's 2 abstentions, Mrs. Newhouse and Mrs. Broussard. The next item is we have an approval of an AED defibrillator to the Wilmington Public Schools by Principal Lisa King in the amount of $2,700. Dr. Brand, would you like to mention anything about that donation?
No, nothing really in addition to what has been outlined in the packet, but thanks does go to Ms. King for her consideration and recognition of a need here in the district. So we thank her for that.
That's great. Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve that donation, please? Mr. Bjork first, Mrs. Bryson second. Thank you. All those in favor? That looks like that's unanimous. That's great. Okay. And we have a request for an approval of an out-of-state field trip. This would be for Wilmington High School students. This would be for April vacation timeframe of 2020. So we're thinking ahead as we need to do. This is a trip to Ireland, Wales, and England. We have a packet of information that outlines the itinerary and the specific dates. Pretty hefty packet. I'll ask for the motion to approve this first, please. Mr. Bjork?
I'll move to approve.
Okay, seconded by Mr. Talbot. Any discussion on this field trip? We do have the teachers involved.
Yeah, I'll just say that this packet was very informative. It covers just about anything that I would have had a question about, and it sounds like, it looks to me like a tremendous opportunity for these students.
Any other comments? Okay.
I just have one question. I remember we approved an out-of-state field trip last year. The dates for the vacation had been a little off, and I was just making sure that these were the exact dates for, and will that matter if, is that the exact April break, I guess is my question.
I'm pretty sure.
Pretty positive, okay.
We leave the Thursday before April break starts, that might be.
Okay, and then you're away the following week?
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? This looks like a good one. Can I go? Looks like a good one. All righty. All those in favor of offering approval for this trip? That would be unanimous, Tristan. Thank you. You're welcome, ladies. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, now we move on to the warrants. I asked Mr. Ruggiero to give us a little code. Just, we do have some turnover on our school committee, and I think it's always helpful to remind ourselves of what the codes are, so what these things stand for. and that we've shared it for you at your seat. So the first bunch, we've got warrants G 436, 437, 401, 402. And I'm going to group these as close as we can. R244, R201, R202, R203, R204, L66, 67, L01, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, FS51, FS52. We'll break that into one group. Can I have a motion to approve those warrants, please? I think I saw Mrs. Bryson's hands first. Mr. Bjork offering the second. All those in favor of that grouping? It looks like unanimous to me. And then we have the payroll warrants. We've got July 3rd, 18, July 18, 18. We have August 1st, 18, August 15, 18, August 29th, 18. Can I have a motion to approve the payroll warrants, please? I saw Mr. Ragsdale's hand first. Mr. Talbot's on the second. All those in favor of approving those payroll? That would be unanimous. Thank you. Then we've got the warrant Circuit Breaker 23. Can I have a motion to approve Circuit Breaker 23, please? Mrs. Bryson, Mr. Talbot on the second. All those in favor? It looks we've got one abstention, Mr. Bjork. The next grouping, we have carry forward 1, carry forward 2, carry forward 3. Could I have a motion to approve those 3, please? Mr. Ragsdale, Mr. Bjork on the second. All those in favor? That would be unanimous. Thank you. And then finally, we have SPED 47, SPED 48, and SPED 01. Can I have a motion to oppose those 3, please? Mrs. Bryson, 1, Mr. Ragsdale, second. All those in favor? And we've got 2 abstentions, Mrs. Newhouse and Mr. Bjork. Thank you. Phew. It's always a mouthful when we do those in the beginning. Okay, our next item on our agenda this evening is our superintendent's report. Dr. Brandt.
Thank you and good evening. A number of things to report as we officially get this year well underway. I'll start with just that despite the heat, which I will talk about a little bit more in a couple of moments, the 2018-19 school year did get off to a great start earlier this week. We, as the committee knows, we kicked things off on Monday where, like in the past, all staff met here in the auditorium at the high school for our opening year address. Dr. Regan, we put him right to work, served as our MC, and did an admirable job handling the setup for the morning. And the presentations also that morning included the following. The Wilmington Education Foundation briefly addressed the staff, as well as your chair, along with some strong support from others around the table. So that was great to have their presence, and thank you for attending. Mary Lou McDonough and Diana Hill received the We're One Wilmington Award for their work associated with the Special Olympics, and so a great acknowledgement there. Mr. Ruggiero recognized members of our 30-year club, and congratulations to those members goes out to Diane Ferguson, an educational assistant at the Boutwell, Sharon Tildesley, an education assistant also at the Boutwell, Mary Beth Smith, who is a teacher at Boutwell, and Marilyn Ganaris, an educational assistant at North School. So congratulations to them. This piece of longevity is absolutely a theme that I'm coming to learn here in Wilmington, where there are so many of our staff who come here and stay and often live as well along the way. So great recognition, and thank you, Paul, for doing so. As members of the committee know, we opened school officially on Tuesday for students, and by all accounts, we got off to a terrific and smooth start. The central office leadership team of Alice, Paul, Brian, and I divided and conquered, so to speak, as we took a number of schools to be present at as students arrived off the buses. And I can tell you, certainly from those schools that I had the pleasure to attend, and it sounds like it was the case across the district, things went incredibly smoothly, and students got right into where they needed to go, and the year formally got underway. And certainly there were some challenges, as they always are, with the opening of school, but it was very impressive the way that throughout the district, it seemed, we got rolling. I'd like to take the opportunity and extend my thanks to George Hooper and his staff and custodians and maintenance crew throughout the town. As many of you know, I've had the pleasure to work in a number of districts in my time here in Massachusetts, but I can honestly say that I have never seen buildings, even despite some of their age, look as great as they do. There is clearly a tremendous hard work and pride that goes into maintaining the facilities here in Wilmington, much to be proud of, and obviously great to support our students and teachers in their work every single day. I will, if I may, take the opportunity and also remind members of the community about 2 opportunities to provide feedback regarding our school system in the upcoming weeks. The information is to gather information in support of my entry into the community, and I'll speak more of that a little bit later on a further agenda item. There is a survey that is available and is open and available for members of the community to provide feedback. It's open until September 9th. The link was included in my opening letter to families and as well is located on our website. There are 4 community forums that I will take this opportunity, if I may, to provide a reminder of. October the 1st, 9:30 in the morning at Woburn Street. October the 3rd, 6:30 p.m. Here at the high school. October 16th, 6:30 p.m. at Shawsheen, and October 25th, 6:30 at the middle school. I will note that those are opportunities that are open to any members of our community, whether you may have children enrolled in the school or not, and you certainly do not need to be associated with any of those schools. The effort here is just to provide a forum, an open forum for a dialogue, and folks to feel free to come out and share their thoughts, ideas, and opinions on the school system. And finally, as I mentioned, and obviously as we are well aware, this week has proved quite challenging as it relates to the climate and the climate conditions. We had a full day of school, as you know, on Tuesday, and what I want to take this opportunity to share with the community is some of the thinking and thought process that goes into deviating from the regular schedule, and that has been unfortunately the case yesterday, and we are heading in that direction for tomorrow. I've been in close contact with a number of folks throughout the district, members of the leadership team, as well as our director of nursing, as well as Mr. Hooper, who's been providing data and feedback. As you and members of the community know, certainly we are not unlike other districts whereby most of the buildings do not have air conditioning. And these excessive conditions, specifically with the heat warnings today, have made things very challenging. It is no exaggeration to say that there have been and were reported a number of classrooms that were in the 90s and some actually at 99 degrees. And so they've been oppressive, and despite efforts to try and remediate by leaving windows open, for example, last night, as you might imagine, that has done little to bring down the temperature. And as a teacher, certainly I remember vividly when you bring into those rooms any age of students, that heat just doesn't have a chance to dissipate. So in checking in with the leadership team and in making that decision, it was trying to weigh what I felt was best for our students and staff well-being. Kudos to everyone who has plugged through, but it's been difficult times, and so the thinking here is to, unfortunately, abbreviate the day. That comes with an impact, I am well aware. Excuse me, but in terms of what has been very difficult and challenging for many, the decision to shorten the day was made, and so we are going to move forward again with an early release tomorrow. As I mentioned in my correspondence to families, it's not something that's taken lightly. This has an impact clearly on instructional time, but so too the attendance to, obviously, the well-being of our staff and students. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions if members of the committee have any.
Any questions or comments from the committee? No? Okay, great. I think we can move on to our next item. Under old business, we have a second reading of policy IKB, the homework policy. And we had our first reading of this policy back at our meeting on June 27th. So as is our tradition, we bring it forward again for a second reading. At this point, I will ask for a motion to approve, and then we can have some discussion if there's anything else to add. I know, Mrs. Bryson, you were heavily involved in that committee a few Want to add anything new that you think we ought to consider?
Do you want a motion first? or am I
Yes,
adding
I'll
it?
take the
I'll
motion
I'll
first.
make a motion.
Thank you. Second, thank you, Mr. Ragsdale. That would be helpful, wouldn't it? All right, now we can discuss it. Nobody's jumping at the chance, huh?
I think, from my point of view, I think we discussed it pretty comprehensively last time. I don't have any additional questions. I think it's pretty sound policy.
Anybody else? Oh, Mrs. Newhouse.
I was on the committee for the policy as well. And one thing that I think the committee brought up a few times, and Jen can talk with this as well, is that kind of like a follow-through with the policy. And, you know, it's one thing for us to approve them, but then making sure that how it's rolled out, you know, and maybe keeping this committee together for the next year. There probably won't be much to do, but maybe at the end of the school year, follow up and see, you know, is this policy working? Is it not working? You know, is there changes? You know, because what we put together may not quite be perfect, but it would be nice to see how it's working or not working at the, you know, at the end, and if we need to make any tweaks to it.
How does the committee feel about that?
I
Mrs.
think
Bryson?
at the last meeting, when we, with first reading, we talked about doing a set of surveys at the end of the year, and there was some talk about keeping the committee going, which should be you. And I don't know if they intended to meet regularly, but I think it was this idea that we would sort of do some kind of, how's it going, and reconvene if needed, I think was sort of the feeling, but I'm not sure what the follow-through will be with that. But I think, and I want to echo this idea of how this is going to be sort of, what are we providing to teachers as they roll this out? It hasn't been approved yet, so it's obviously was not a part of opening day and early staff work, and so this is going to be something now that's sort of an add-on when we've already, homework will start or has started, and so I guess I just want to make sure that there's going to be that follow-through, as Mrs. Newhouse pointed out. But as far as this actual, I'm proud of this, and I think we kind of worked out a lot of those pieces at the first reading of this, and people had lots of questions, but I think we went back and forth and felt pretty good about it to approve it the first time.
Mr. Ragsdale?
So Joe kind of took the words out of my mouth, so I'll just be brief that I think it's important for us to follow up on this. And a policy like this is general enough that the implementation matters a lot. And there might have to be some trial and error and a little bit of analysis of how well we're doing. And so I think that having this as a future agenda item to come up sometime later on where we can evaluate, you know, where we are and are we happy with how it's being implemented throughout the district is a good idea.
Great, thank you, Mr. Ragsdale. Dr. Brand?
Yes, thank you. And with the understanding that this policy will proposal will move forward to become policy. You know, there's obviously, as a school committee, the expectation that I know that I hold as your superintendent to ensure the policy is implemented. This is an interesting one, homework subject in its nexus, obviously, with the day-to-day events and activities that take place, unlike a number of other policies that sometimes don't directly impact the work in classrooms in the same way that this does. And so certainly what I can tell you is even in the absence of the suggestion of keeping together the committee, it's certainly, I recognize, important that they're, starting with the leadership team, is a very articulated path forward to ensure that it gets implemented and that we're monitoring its progress. So thank you for your work collectively and those that aren't here on this. And as I've already had this discussion with our administrative team, certainly this becomes something that we need to attend to and think about its rollout. So,
Great, thank you. Mr. Talbot?
Quick question. How is this policy disseminated to the public so that they can see it, view it, and then make their comments on it?
Sure. Well, typically, once we approve it, it becomes part of our policy manual that is hosted on our website. As we all know, sometimes that can be a little bit difficult to find. But is that something that the committee discussed as part of their research and consideration?
Well, part of the research, surveys went out to parents, students, faculty. We took in, I forget the number of surveys that were actually filled out, but we did get input from all of those communities and took all that into consideration when we were doing the final draft. So I do think the community has had a chance to have that input already. I think now it's just putting it into place and doing a follow-up to make sure the policy that was written is working as it was intended.
Mrs. Bryson?
Is there a way to, because it will be in the it will be in the handbook, but is there, because it's brand new and it's quite different, is there a way to just sort of post this as a separate piece so people can access it more easily on our site as well, where we can say, this is the new homework policy, and then I'm sure social media will grab onto that and share it abundantly, but I wonder if that might be just an easier way for people to access it quickly. I don't imagine it's something that will go home, well, from the administrators or from the teachers?
Yeah,
Or would
that-
it?
If I may.
Yeah.
So no, so there hasn't been discussion, waiting to get to this point, of course, first in its formalization, but it does strike me as something that is very different, again, than the passing of a typical policy, and starting with, obviously, the instructional leadership team, thinking about this dissemination piece and bringing awareness to it is something that we have to be thoughtful of. And my own thoughts are that this would require certainly far more outreach with our parents and guardians than just, drawing attention to a policy, on the website. Certainly that's one piece, but I do think that if we have to ensure that our teachers are obviously following it and our parents are aware of it and the implications of it. So it's going to take a little bit of time, and I recognize that, but we do need to see that this gets pushed out and that people are aware of this, both in the district as well as in our households. I'm not sure, Dr. Regan, if you have anything to add or you'd want, but.
Forgive me, not being on the committee, I don't have a lot of the background, but it certainly is a policy that is of interest, I think, to families more so than some, perhaps, don't take offense to this, other policies that the school committee may design. So we may want to think sort of along the lines about what Ms. Bryson was saying, where, you pull this one out and it's sort of front and center, and we can put a link right on the website, or we can, use the, I don't know what the system is called, when you do a phone call, email out for the early release, Connect 5 is what it is. So we could look at that as perhaps a way to sort of make it front and center, and then I'd be happy to talk about follow-up, and if you want to bring the committee back together, whatever the school committee would like to do, I mean, obviously happy to facilitate that.
Mr. Talbot, did that
Yeah.
give you some clarification?
Yeah.
Great, okay. Mrs.
So
Bryson?
the open houses are coming soon, so I wonder if
That's good.
that would be another opportunity for this to be introduced at that point. Would that make sense?
Mr. Bjork, did you have your hand up?
I do not.
No problem, okay. Any further discussion on this topic? I think there's some good points that were raised as next steps. I certainly am appreciative of the follow-up and making sure that our policy, as we're approving it, does actually get followed through. And if we need to make tweaks along the way, then that's what's best for our kids. So let's keep that in mind as well. Oh, Mrs. Bryson.
Question, we did not address this on the committee. I assume that summer reading assignments are included in homework, but it's not explicit. So because it's not explicit here, my assumption as a committee member and then also as a parent would be that we would follow the same policy for summer reading. But I just wanted to, I was just thinking about that, honestly, because I hadn't been thinking about summer reading when we were doing this work, and then I'm on the other end of it now. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. I'm guessing it would be the same policy. I just don't know if we want to come back to that possibly at a later date.
That's a good point. And there are also some classes at the high school level that require some pre-work, some summertime work that I think would be along the lines of summer reading as well.
Thank you.
All right, great. So we have a move on the table to approve the second reading of policy IKB homework. We have a second. We've had some discussion. I think we've exhausted our discussion at this point. Are people ready for a vote? I'm thinking yes. Okay, all those in favor of approving the second reading, please signify. That looks like unanimous to me. Thank you very much. All righty, we're moving on to new business. And our first item under new business this evening is the appointment of the superintendent to the SEAM Board of Directors. And in our packet, there is a memo that outlines some information for our consideration. So I will start by asking for a motion to appoint Superintendent Dr. Glenn Brand to the SEAM Board of Directors for the 2018-2019 school year. Do I have that motion? Mr. Talbot, thank you. Seconded by Mr. Bjork. Any discussion or questions? No, it looks like we have some good information here provided for us. Sure.
Can I just say thank you for the information? I think it's really helpful.
Thank you. It was helpful for me, too.
That was very clear. This is
It's a win-win.
Yeah, this is very clear, so I think that's helpful. All righty, so we have a motion to appoint Superintendent Dr. Glenn Brand to the SEAM Board of Directors for this school year. We have a second. We've exhausted our discussion. I'll ask for all those in favor. That looks like that's unanimous to me. Thank you very much. Okay, our next item is an update on the athletic summer camps. And we have a memo in our packet, Dr. Brand. I don't see Mr. Albert, but is there anything that we need to know, or Mr. Ruggiero? Okay, Mr. Ruggiero is going to fill us in.
Thank you. This was the 10th year we have been running the athletic summer camps. This year we ran 9 camps. We had planned to run 11, but unfortunately 2, due to low enrollment, we were unable to run. And I think the reason for that was as our school year went longer and later than anticipated, the camp would kind of run into, August and so forth. I think that impacted it. But even with that, we had 5 more participants and about $4,100 more profit than the previous year, even while running 2 fewer camps. Tim Alberts, Ed Harrison, all the coaches and assistants should be commended for doing a great job. I mean, it's the kids that participate. I think we had over 500 this year through the course of the various weeks. It's a great, service for the families and so forth, and they do a great job, and I think all the kids have a great time. So, and like anything, we'll continue to look at it, and, if we can better it, we'll try to better it and so forth. So, but I think it was another great year great summer for the camps.
Mr. Talbot?
Where does the $48,000 go?
It goes into the athletic revolving account, as we've done every year, and it helps to offset some of the expenses in the athletic department.
Questions or comments? Mr. Ragsdale?
Let me say that I think that looking at the year-by-year growth of that program, if you just kind of look down that list from 2009 to today, it's amazing how much it's grown and how much it's succeeded since then, and just and how quickly. And I think that a great opportunity that the athletic department is providing. So
Yeah, I think it's great, not only for the additional revenue to help the athletic department, but it's a great service to the kids. I mean, there's, you have 500 kids participating, that's great.
it's amazing to see from where it started to where it is now.
I just say, having a child that's participated in the past, a lot of fun, very cost-effective option for parents looking for care for their children over the summer. The kids have a lot of fun. So that's great. We should be really proud of that program. All righty, next item is the personnel report. Who's going to tackle that?
Paul, you can speak.
Sure. In your packet, you have a personnel report. We provide this quarterly. So what you have here is staff that had left the district and their replacements. So it's a much smaller list than maybe a couple of years prior ago, but and there's various. So in here you have the school, the individual who left, teacher, ed assistant, and so forth, their position, reason, the position they hold, who the replacement is, and some notes. We did have some various, staff that moved on, as an example. Our assistant superintendent last year, Mr. Gallagher, went on to a superintendency and so forth. Andrea Stern Armstrong is here, our new HR director, and I commend her for putting this report together. She does all this work and tries to make everything make sense, and sometimes, it may look simple on this piece of paper, but there's a few moving parts that we deal with, so thank you.
Any questions or comments on the personnel report? I just had one comment. First of all, welcome aboard, Andrew. We will look forward to working with you. I appreciate you being here with us tonight. I'm assuming that some of these positions that are on this report have probably since been filled since you put this together, that I understand. Okay, so that's pretty good. Any areas that you see as priorities are kind of urgent to fill positions?
I think the language-based positions, which they're working diligently on, and then I think the other, which we've been trying to focus on, is there's an educational sign language interpreter that they need to have filled, so that's another. But they're definitely, the principals are definitely plugging away. And as of this morning, I received like 3 calls saying that there was additional people they're really looking at, hoping to have references completed by tomorrow, so.
Okay.
So I think a large majority of this will be filled by next week is sort of what I'm anticipating.
Okay, that's great to hear. And where we've already started school with the open positions, how does that affect our students where we've already started?
They've been using subs. So I
Subs,
talked to
okay.
Kathy Fuller today just to kind of see what she needed from me to kind of move along, and she did say that they've actually been doing okay with filling some of them with subs that we have for per diem subs, and then moving some of the internal teachers around or the ed assistants. So
Just to make sure it's appropriate coverage?
exactly.
Yeah.
So they
Okay.
definitely are feeling okay with it. So.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments on the personnel report? Mr. Ragsdale?
Paul, it looks like that everyone who changed jobs is captured here, including people who transferred within the district. Is that correct? That if someone leaves their position, even if they're moving to another school, but still within the district, that's reflected here?
Yes, for the most part. There are some moving parts that may not be on the report. So if an educational assistant moved from school A to school B, and that educational assistant in school B went to school C, and then we're hiring for one person, this report would get pretty complicated and long, because you're filling one position. Someone retired, but everyone kind of moves around. You're filling one position, but it might look like we're filling 5
Three
positions.
dominoes that are
Yeah,
being knocked
no,
over
so
at the same time.
we didn't do that. If you want that, we clearly, Andrew could pull that together, but for this purpose, it was kind of, here's the replacement, even though it might have been 4 people, 4 places offset, but it's, kind of we try to do the one-to-one, but, we could, if you're interested in that, just see where people bounce around, but they do move around.
Mrs. Bryson?
Are we able to see an update before our next meeting? Could we get?
I mean, if that's what's decided, I can provide, I have an ongoing, another spreadsheet that does have updates of who's going where and who's been hired.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, moving right along here this evening, our next item is the superintendent evaluation process, and I believe we are also going to hear from Dr. Brand on his goals for the coming year.
You are.
Great.
Thank you very much. In your packet, there is a memo, excuse me, 2018-19 superintendent goal setting, and then accompanying that this evening is a brief PowerPoint that just is not included in your packet, but will be provided after. It is coinciding with, of course, the start of the year to be starting already to think about this important process, and that is goal setting. And so this evening, the intention is to provide members of the committee with some of my thinking, I suppose you could say, in terms of some proposed goals that will become an important cornerstone, if you will, of my work as your superintendent in the year ahead. As members of the committee, and I trust the community are well aware, certainly one of the most critical roles of the school committee, and there are many, but one is the evaluation of school superintendent. And the evaluation process is indeed one important piece of your work respectively. There's a lot of data that goes into that overall evaluation that is an annual requirement under Massachusetts state law, but annual goal setting is certainly a component of that, of this overall process, the evaluation process that is. Ideally, it is not just my own belief, but certainly what I know the Department of Education has spent time in discussing, and that is there should be a strong alignment between goals throughout a district. They start with district goals, they trickle or flow down to superintendent, to the respective school and principal goals. And that is indeed something that I think is absolutely critical when we think about the overall success of a large organization such as the school district. There's a bit of an exception I see as we think about, or as I think about this year, and just very briefly, and as you'll note in the memo, I point out two of those things. The reality, of course, of my circumstance, coming on board and entering the district, a good portion of, not all, but a good portion of my year will be spent trying to understand what's on people's minds and formulating some thoughts and ideas and recommendations. And so that will be a bulk of the work, of which I'll talk about in a little bit more in a moment. And the other piece that's important to note is that the district's most recent strategic plan actually expired at the end of last school year. And so, so quite honestly, I see this as really a wonderful time period, and sort of the word has before been used around resetting, but taking stock of where we're going as a district. And I think that this aligns quite well with my entry as your new superintendent, seeking some data, and then embarking upon the work of establishing a new strategic plan. So that alignment of goals that I spoke about a moment ago perhaps is not as tight, if you will, as I would see it in the future. There are three goals. Next slide, please. Thank you, Dr. Regan. There are three goals that I propose for your consideration. The first one, goal number one, as I mentioned, the completion of the superintendent's entry plan. The work associated with this goal has begun, and in many ways actually started before I entered the district officially on July 1st, but certainly has continued, largely through really many conversations over the course of the summer, but now quickly moving into the other phases that I talked about earlier in my introductory remarks, and that is a survey that is open and available for both staff as well as the community to provide their thoughts and ideas. And also, as mentioned, a number of community forums, the four that I mentioned, and equally important is the opportunity to also provide opportunities for staff throughout the district to meet with myself, for them to share their feedback. I have meetings planned over the course of September and October at all of our school buildings, and staff are aware of those, and so I look forward to those opportunities as well as the conversations with the community. The intention and where I'm going with this, if you might wonder, is taking all of that data, of which there'll be a lot, sifting through it, sharing that with my team, and working to try and assemble some of the themes and key findings that seem to surface. And no doubt they'll be there, the themes that is, and compile that into a report in which I will present to the school committee and, of course, to the community to share those findings. What is it that's on people's minds, and what seems to surface as those things that are of utmost concern, and bring forth with that recommendations. Those recommendations are things that, as a group, as a team, may be something to further consider moving forward. The timeline, well, I mentioned that that's already begun, the work's associated with that, but it would be my intention to finish the data gathering and then to bring forward a report. And I say mid-November, early December, not because I don't think that I can't get this goal accomplished, but by November. The tricky piece when you take a look at our calendar for the school committee meetings as we get into the Thanksgiving holiday might be just something to contend with. But that's the anticipated timeline. And so I'll maybe, if I may, just pause there if there are questions or comments, or did you want me to go through all three goals?
We can discuss in between if the committee is amenable to that. I think that makes sense. Any comments or questions on goal number 1? Mrs. Bryson?
I just have, I guess, a question about how are we going to circulate the community forum dates again and again and again? Because
Yes.
we need lots of reminders, and
Yes.
I think it's important to
Yeah.
put it out there as much as we can. So is there a plan for that?
There is, and that will come from my office, electronically through our Connect 5 system. So people are very busy, and it's not lost upon me that in particular at this time of the year with a flood of information, it would be easy to lose sight of. So that's my intention to do so, and I'll also ask principals within their respective communications, of which I'm still sort of learning exactly what that looks like, to share those dates as well.
Great.
And for what it's worth, I will tweet it out too. So
That's a good idea. And maybe with the survey link a few more
Yes.
times as well?
Yes.
As opposed to people having to go search for it. I
Yeah.
think that might be.
yeah, I've already taken that step with the staff, and certainly will replicate that with the community.
Great.
So
Thank you.
thank you.
Any other questions or comments on goal number 1? Seems like a good place to start.
Just a quick question. but,
Oh, sure.
Is the link to the surveys, is that prominent on our website right now?
So it's embedded within the letter to the community that I put, that I actually posted on the superintendent's page on the website. So it's in the letter itself. I don't think that it's a standalone item right now, but if it's not, it's a good suggestion. It's gone out electronically as well with the beginning of the year letter in an email through Connect 5.
Yeah, I think that maybe if we can get it into a prominent place on the website, that might be helpful, because it feels to me that so many of this is kind of like you catch that passing attention when there's just that moment when like they might just kind of go and quickly do it. And then they're like, oh, if they have to dig, another layer
Right.
deeper to find it, then
Right.
people are on to something else.
Thank you.
Mr. Talbot?
I noticed that at a lot of schools, they have monitors as you walk in the door. They have like TV screens, maybe something you can put up there, at the Woburn Street or Shawshene or at school, superintendent meeting at blah, blah. As they come in, they'll see that and be like, oh, you know what?
Yeah,
I want to check that out.
Right,
that's a good point.
thank you.
Anything else?
And certainly if there are members of the committee, even after the fact here this evening, have ideas around, one thing that I have not yet done is think strategically about reaching out to perhaps other organizations that may have a good catchment or, a good distribution channel to get the information out there. And especially, again, I think it's very worthwhile and important to consider those that may not any longer have students enrolled in the school system, but certainly have a voice and experiences and things to share. So if you have thoughts, I'd love to have those as well. So.
I'm just thinking, having just essentially finished with the superintendent search, people were completing quite a bit of the search, so I feel like it needs to be, and they did it, and surveys were completed.
Yes.
But it's important to remember that they have done a lot of that, and so I think we need to make sure this is different, this is informing something different, and that's my only worry with
Right.
parents attending to it, is that they've completed that, they came to the meetings, and so I think we just need to kind of
Some fatigue.
yeah,
that
and
maybe is concerning.
Tristan was very helpful in getting the word out about those meetings and within the library and some other
Right.
places around town, so.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for that feedback. Goal number 2, the Coordinated Program Review, or CPR, the acronym that I know so often is referenced. The corrective action plan. So as members of the committee know, as a school district, Wilmington Public Schools recently participated, as do all districts in the Commonwealth, in the Department of Education's Coordinated Program Review. There's a wide variety of areas that this review focuses on, including special education, civil rights requirements, and English language education. It's my understanding that there's really 2 prongs or 2 phases to this coordinated program review. The first is a report on the findings from a team of folks that visited the district last spring. Really, the work started far before the spring. I do know that. But then the second phase is the is termed a corrective action plan. And certainly from my experiences in a variety of different districts, this piece is the most important. because what it really sets out is some marching orders, recommendations, and in some cases, not recommendations, but must-dos, to bring into compliance services or programs or various other aspects that the district offers. And so that's under the umbrella of the corrective action plan. And I include this here because it is, on the one hand, of course, there's a large body of work that falls to our Director of Student Support Services and her respective staff and our principals throughout the district. But it's not, in my eyes, just that of a student services task. It's really work that the district as a whole has to own. And this has to be taken seriously. And as the superintendent, I think that it's critical that I provide support for our director, Alice, to certainly roll out this work. But there's much more coordination that we need to be thinking about that will span really the better part of this year. And so I put this here as a proposal because I think it's critically important that it's attended to and that it's a district activity as opposed to just one section of our district. So the fact that it's here, I feel, is particularly the inclusion of the progress monitoring, the mid-year and end-of-the-year report, that is work that I need to ensure as your superintendent gets done. And so that's for those reasons that I provide this to you as a goal of consideration. And happy to have any thoughts or comments or feedback on goal number 2.
Mr. Ragsdale?
Have we made the state's report available? Is that available on our website, or can it be provided to us?
So first off, thank you for raising it. The intention at the next meeting, as I meet with your chair to talk about that agenda, is absolutely to have that corrective action plan presented here to the committee and to the community. I don't know for certain if there's a link yet to that report. I will find out the status of that. But what I do know and what I understand, and Paul, please correct me if otherwise, but the corrective action plan is not something that's been shared with the community as of yet.
Not
So that's the next step, and we'll make that report available online as well, too.
Okay, are those considered like one report, that it's a combined, like the state's report and then the corrective action plan? Is that one document that has everything?
I think it's 2 different documents. They might compile it as one with an appendix. I have to take another look at that. But and certainly if the first report, we'll call it, is not available, that should be as well, too. It's certainly on the Department of Ed's website, but it also should be on our website or a link there, too.
Okay.
So.
Any other questions or comments on goal number 2? Ready to move on? All right.
Thank you. And goal number 3, strategic plan development. As I mentioned, the district's most recent strategic plan came to an end at the end of last school year. And so, honestly, I think the timing in so many respects is really ideal. And even if you didn't have a new superintendent here in the role, obviously work would and should have unfolded to build a new plan. And so we'll have this gap year, if you will, in between, but I absolutely think that it's imperative that work begin on developing this plan. And I think that the connection with the findings in the superintendent's report will be a great starting point, as too may some of the feedback from the superintendent search that was mentioned earlier, in terms of really helping informing and kickstarting, if you will, the thinking around the plan development. With your support and approval of this plan, my proposal here is to embark upon the start of the strategic plan around the mid-year point, or late winter at the very least, and I provide here a proposed timeline. And you know, as I thought about this and its development, gives me an opportunity to really, as a superintendent, get to know much better the district, see in action our schools and our programs and services, and you know, take care of the work associated with the entry plan. bring that to a close, and then really move into this work. It would be the case that this proposal would be a widespread representative group of stakeholders that would include, in no particular order, our staff, students to some degree, our parents, guardians, community members, school committee members, and administrators. What I absolutely believe would be possible, ambitious perhaps, but I think possible, did I say impossible? Okay, good. I meant possible, is to gear up for the launch of this committee shortly after we return after the winter break, and aim to have a plan put together by the end of the school year. And I acknowledge that it may be somewhat ambitious, because I think a plan that has fidelity and has requires time to build it, to socialize or publicize it as a draft, perhaps as you will, to present it to the school committee and community to get feedback. But I think it's possible, and I think with a firm plan in place, it can be done. And if we have, and hopefully we can have folks together who are up for the challenge. But I think that, again, with your support and approval of this, to be able to start next school year, that what will be, as hard as it is to think about the 2019-20 school year, with a new strategic plan for the Wilmington Public Schools would really be important. And so that's the third goal here. Certainly not work myself alone, but work that, as your superintendent, I would propose to you to ensure gets tackled and taken care of.
Okay. Questions or comments on goal number 3? No, looks, Mr. Ragsdale.
Dr. Van, how, for the strategic plan, how far out do you anticipate having that plan look? I mean, one of the benefits I feel of having that type of plan is that it allows you to not only think about what needs to be done in a term or a year, but you really can, look a few years out. Not everything can be accomplished, in a year. Some things really do take a while. And it allows you to really start making progress on long-term goals as well. How long-term should we be thinking?
It's a great question, I myself think that 3 years seems to be about right, and there could be other thoughts certainly as we get rolling with the process. And I believe the last plan was 5 years, I think, and I know as I look around and see whether it be within the educational sector or others, sometimes they're in that range. But I feel like 3 years is more realistic, not to be planning too far out, and still being true to being open to change or adjustments. And 5 years, at least in my opinion, is really hard with change happening so quickly and rapidly around us. So that would be my proposal, but it would be a proposal, and certainly I think that it would be an important, probably starting point for a conversation with this committee when it's together to think about what that is. The defining that would be critical, but it would be more than 1 year. I think that that's important too. I think it's important to wrap our heads around budgetary planning, and any other planning that might ensue as a result of what's included in that plan. So, but thank you.
I agree that 5 years, I think, seems way too
Yeah,
long.
yeah.
You get to year 4 of your plan and the facts on the ground have completely changed, and
Right.
now you're
Right. Thank you
not
for that
working very
question.
well.
Any other question or comments? No. So thank you, Dr. Brand, for introducing your goals to us. This would be part of the superintendent evaluation process. So that gives us some information there. We've got another slide here that talks about the proposed goals and feedback. They're finalized and presented as a first read at the September 12th meeting. That's our next meeting. And then we would approve the goals, or our goal would be to approve those goals at the September 26th meeting. Share that. People comfortable with that time frame? I also brought a binder, in our hopes that we will get a copy of this to each one of you, because we will all be involved in the evaluation process. We've only done it once as a committee. I believe that myself, Mr. Bjork, and Mrs. Burns were the only ones that were involved in the process. Mrs. Kane was also, yes, Mrs. Kane was also included in that. And I remember at the time feeling pretty overwhelmed by the process and as it was laid out to us. As we worked through the various steps, it became a little bit more tenable and obtainable. I think it would be appropriate for us to keep talking about this as the year progresses and familiarizing ourselves with the process. I think there are a couple of things towards the end that we'll have to give some consideration and discuss about how we pull our individual evaluations together into one. I know some other towns have had some issues with that process. So something for us to think about for the future, but just FYI, it's coming. Okay. All right, any other comments before we move on to the next agenda item? I think that gives me a pretty good segue. Dr. Regan, if you could continue to drive the bus for me. I have a couple of slides to share with the group for the next topic. So a couple of weeks ago, on August 15th, the group of us here participated in a workshop that was facilitated by the Massachusetts Association of School Committees. I think all of us that were able to be there thought that it was a great conversation and discussion. It was very timely with Dr. Brand and Dr. Regan joining us. I think we're all cognizant of us working together as an effective governance team is important, and we should keep talking about it and keep improving and keep developing. But I thought I would share publicly some of the slides and the topics that we discussed that evening. Although it was a public meeting, we did not have an audience, nor did we have WCTV film it for us. So on this first slide, this is the entry point for the MASC's program. They use this illustration of a house and the various parts. It does a pretty good job of illustrating the relationships and roles and responsibilities. We're talking about the walls being our meetings, the roof being the sustaining the progress, some of the systems, how we stay on top of our progress as a team, the foundation being the operating protocols, which was really the focus of our meeting on the 15th, and the framework being our overarching goals. Now we can advance. So the most important responsibility of the school committee working in conjunction with our leadership team is, ta-da, student achievement, right? That's the ultimate goal. So we are always going to be talking about that. We want to make sure that our practices as a committee are always related to student achievement. As I mentioned, the committee and the superintendents are a governance team in this mission. We talked about effective leadership, supporting the achievement. We got to have a good working relationship. Doesn't mean we're always going to agree. It doesn't mean that the school committee is always going to vote the same way, but we do want to have a good working relationship and a team that learns to work together well by doing the work after establishing norms and protocols. So we can jump forward. These were just some of the objectives that we covered for our meeting that evening. Again, talking about working collaboratively, ensuring that we were all on the same page about how we would communicate and operate. We talked a lot about protocols. We did not quite get to goals and priorities, but that's something that we can continue the conversation as we move forward in the school year. I thought this slide was particularly good at illustrating the two sides, committees' roles and superintendent roles. The school committee is basically the what, the why, the how much. The superintendent and his district leadership team are really the how, who, when, and where. The school committee being the bridge between the community as a whole and the superintendent, whereas the superintendent is the bridge between the staff and the committee. So we can go forward on that. That's okay, no problem. I think it's also to point out that the school committee is charged with operating as a team. We are individuals that bring together different points of view, but we do not act as individuals, we act as a committee. So on the committee side, the power is exercised through official action at properly posted meetings. So we cannot get together outside of a properly posted meeting and discuss issues. We govern through policy. We are in charge of the financial resources. We really want to be engaged in the community. We sustain a great committee and superintendent relationship, and we serve as the employer of record for the school staff. As individual members, we have no individual authority. As individuals, we have no greater power than any other qualified voter in our community. I always think that's a point to keep in mind. We're here to contribute and communicate vision and goals. Our job is to ask the critical questions. Sometimes it might be a little uncomfortable, but we're looking to make good, solid decisions, keeping in mind the kids. Everything that we do is about the kids in our community. We're here to support committee decisions. We are to be dedicated to the work on the behalf of, again, the kids. I think that's always what I try to keep in mind, right? That's why we do this crazy job. All right. A big part of our discussion that evening was about adopting protocols, developing a better working relationship among themselves and between members and the superintendent. And I would say not just the superintendent, but the district leadership team is important to keep in mind. We're going to articulate and preserve what's going well, kind of being respectful of our past history, but also there's always room for improvement. We do like to have efficient committee meetings. You know, we don't want to be here for hours and hours, but we do have business to conduct. And also, protocols help us focus our energy and effort in working as a team. Okay. All right, and that's all I had for slides, and I did borrow those liberally from MASC. I did, of course, get permission first, but I figured why recreate the wheel if they had some pretty good illustrations to begin with. As far as next steps go, again, we had a great discussion that night about operating protocols, and we pulled together a long list of ideas as possibilities. David and Jen were kind enough to offer to compile our thoughts together, something that we can continue to discuss, perhaps put it into some sort of document form that could be part of our handbook that we all have. I think it's also something that we could post on the district website so that the public knows how that we operate with each other. Anything to share, David and Jen, with where we're at?
We're very close and
Good.
ready to present something.
Yeah,
at
so
the
we're very
next
close to
meeting.
having something to share with the rest of the committee.
Great.
We have a draft of operating protocols based on some of the examples that were shared with us at the workshop, as well as our own workshops of the hopes and our own notes of what we wanted for our meetings. And we, I think that having these written protocols is a great opportunity for us to reflect on how we do our work and what the best way to do it is. And so we're making a few tweaks, but we have a good working draft, and should be ready to present it to the committee at the next meeting.
Maybe at the next meeting, the September
Definitely,
12th?
definitely.
We were
Okay.
pretty much ready
You're pretty close.
for today, but we
Okay.
didn't want to just bring it today and say, okay,
understand.
by the way, read this really quickly. So
Yeah.
we made a few more tweaks, just reordering things and trying to think about where should things go as far as if we put this first, does it make it look like it's more important? So a little bit of that. I'm sure there'll be more changes. I was trying to sort of think, what would people say? What would the committee say about that?
Yeah.
So, but I think we'll bring it back, and then I'm sure people will have ideas about some of the items, maybe reordering, but I think it's a really strong working draft.
I mean, it's ready to be shared, basically, but we wanted to give people at least a few days to reflect on it and sit and have it before they were coming to discuss it.
Okay,
So we'll
great.
have it for the next meeting, definitely.
Okay. Anybody else that participated in the workshop have any comments that they'd like to share or any thoughts in the workshop? No? We did talk a lot that night, didn't we? It did go on longer than we thought, so that's good. It was a very healthy, productive discussion, and one that I thought was very timely with Dr. Brand joining us and starting his entry plan, but I think it's something that will continue, and we can look forward to discussing more. So I think the next step at our September 12th meeting is for us to review those protocols as a group and share those out publicly. And then I think the second step is we would have our own goals to develop and start talking about. And those obviously would be aligned with Dr. Brand's individual goals, but also the district goals. Okay. Any, Mrs. Briggs?
Again, we've said this before, but I thought it was just incredibly beneficial and the right time. Luckily, Mrs. Newhouse had just been appointed. She was able to join us, which was incredible to have the full committee participate in that. And I just wanted to thank you for organizing that and having our speaker. And I thought it was a really excellent use of our time, helping us build our team. So thank you.
Great, thank you. All righty, I think we can move on to item F under new business. And I asked to add this one. The town hall has suggested we add, I'm going to call it an agenda disclaimer to our postings and to all of our meeting agendas going forward. This was something that came up when we were pulling together the agenda for our joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen. We did add it to that posting, but at the time I said, wait, time out, I'd really like to discuss this with the committee before we just throw this on there. I didn't really think it was appropriate for me to make that decision as an individual. So in your packet, I have shared the suggested wording, and I can read it so that the public is aware as well. And that wording is, this agenda has been prepared in advance and represents a listing of topics that the chair reasonably anticipates will be discussed at the meeting. However, the agenda does not necessarily include all matters which may be taken up at this meeting. So that's the suggested wording, and my understanding is that the Board of Selectmen will be using similar phrasing on their agendas going forward, and I believe some other public committees will be doing something similar. At the time that that suggestion was made to us, I did ask Tristan to reach out to Attorney Andy Waugh. He is our school committee attorney, because I wanted a little legal advice, and I wanted to make sure that we had some background to help us in discussion. And Andy's response, the first sentence of the language, this agenda has been prepared in advance and represents a listing of topics that the chair reasonably anticipates will be discussed at the meeting. Per Andy, this is language that's taken right from the open meeting law, almost word for word. So he did not have any issue with that first sentence. The second sentence, and in true lawyer fashion, he says, is potentially more problematic. The language that's suggested is not found anywhere in the law, but he did do a little research for us. He did talk to some of his colleagues that are town councils in other communities, and they're starting to think about this kind of language. Andy's concern is that someone might view the language as allowing our community more latitude in not posting items and then claiming that the item was not reasonably anticipated. So he urges us a little caution with that second sentence. And that was really the second sentence that I personally had a little issue with. I think it could be problematic. I'll use the same word. So I wanted to share that out publicly. I wanted to share it with the committee for your thoughts and comments and questions. Mr. Bjork.
Yeah, I'm not crazy about that second sentence as well. To me, it looks like it opens up the potential for public comments to cover just about any subject that they may want.
Yeah, and I'm in agreement. Mr. Ragsdale.
I have the same concern, and this is also coming from the perspective of having just worked on operating protocols
Exactly.
For the committee. And so sneak preview, one of them is basically saying that items will, except in rare circumstances, will not be spontaneously brought up that are not properly posted on an agenda, but will be put on a future agenda. And that, so that in our protocols, at least we're proposing that should be something that we are committing to. And so this is a little bit of maybe weaseling of getting, around the open meeting law in some circumstances. And I don't want it to be perceived that way or to be that
Right.
way.
Right, and I will just say, historically, traditionally, the Wilmington School Committee, we have always stuck to our posted agenda, and it gives us something to comfortably hang our hat on. If there's ever those controversial questions that come up, we have something that we can hang our hat on, and we make sure that we are following the open meeting law. That's just what we've done in the past. I can tell you what the Board of Selectmen are currently using phrasing on their agendas under new business. It just says, items not reasonably anticipated by the chairman 48 hours in advance of the meeting. Now, I don't believe they've ever had any issues with that phrasing. They have their own attorney and made their own decision to use certain phrasing on their agendas. But again, I didn't want to be the one making the decision for our committee, as I'm not an individual, I'm part of a committee.
Are you asking us if we want to adopt that?
I just want to talk about it a little bit further. Again, this is a suggestion, Attorney Waugh's comment is it's not illegal to use this phrasing. It's just can be problematic. And again, he doesn't have a problem with the first sentence because that's right from the open meeting law. It is what it is. Mr. Bjork.
Yeah, I don't think there's any need for that. I think that the idea of a public meeting and the concept is to have a structured meeting with everyone having the information they need ahead of time. So, and this first line, listing of topics that the chair reasonably anticipates, that gives you a little wiggle room if you need it. I don't think any other statements, personally, I don't think any other statements need to be added.
Mr. Ragsdale.
I also don't see any benefit to us in the second statement here. If someone objected to an item that was taken up at one of our meetings and said this was not properly posted, this wasn't on the agenda, are we going to really point to this and say, well, look at the disclaimer that we had on our agenda? That's not going to carry any weight, either legally, really, or with anyone who actually objects to it. The case has to be taken up on its own merit anyway, whether it's something that was so minor and incidental that it didn't need to be an official agenda item. So I don't think that this actually gives us much legal protection of any type, or makes us look any better if any kind of conflict or controversy did come up over anything at one of our meetings.
Mrs. Bryson.
I agree, and I'm fine with the first sentence if that's being recommended to us. I think that's somewhat harmless, but I would not be comfortable with the second sentence either.
I agree with what everyone's saying.
Okay.
Are you looking for a motion tonight?
Yeah, that
Are you
was
looking for a
my
motion?
my next prompt there, is I think I'm hearing through our discussion that we're comfortable with the first sentence, but not necessarily the second. So I'd be looking for a motion to accept the first sentence.
So I move that we adopt the first sentence as documented on, in our informational packet, and discard the second sentence, and not consider that third sentence that you had mentioned.
I'll second that.
Okay, Mrs. Bryson, the second. Right. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I think we're ready to take a vote on that. Okay. All those in favor of Mr. Bjork's motion? Ms. Bryson's, you look like you're going to raise your hand.
I was going to say yes. No.
Okay.
I'm ready to vote.
You're ready to vote. All right, let's move forward then. All those in favor? That would be unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Do you want to touch on this for revised agendas at all?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. There could be more information coming. Okay, our next item is a review of subcommittees. And Tristan supplied for us in our meeting packet the participants in our various school committee subcommittees. This is as of late spring, May of this past year. We do know that we need to replace Mrs. Kane on the various committees that she serves. As she did serve on, I don't know if folks are ready to raise their hand this evening or if they want to think about it a little bit. I'm fine either way.
To raise their hand to what, volunteer for?
I
did
did
know what the-
meet with Mrs. Newhouse today for an orientation of sorts, if you will. If she had an opportunity to look at those and you want to raise your hand for anything, or if there's anyone that wants to rethink what they're involved in at this point, that's okay too.
Yeah, I
Mr.
think I
Talbot.
would, probably decide if anybody else wants to do the superintendent evaluation subcommittee, that I would probably step away from, because I wouldn't be able to probably fulfill till the very end of that.
Okay. Anybody else want to remove themselves from a subcommittee first? We'll take that as step one, and then we'll, and that's certainly okay. We're having the opportunity to do so. Okay, as we know, no more than 3 school committee members can serve on a school committee, because that would be over our quorum if we had more. Most of these do not require too much additional work, some more than others, and we have, to the best of our ability, given a little bit of guidance under the various listings. Mr. Ragsdale?
Just that I would be happy to replace Mrs. Kane on the policy subcommittee, unless someone else was more interested in doing that, or if Joe wanted to step into that.
Okay,
But I would be willing to do that.
okay. Anybody have an issue with that? And Mrs. Newhouse, are there any in particular that you have interest in, if you've had time to think about it, that you'd like to raise your hand for?
I can do pretty much any of them. I can definitely take Tom's place on the superintendent evaluation.
Okay, that sounds great.
And it looks like there's just 2 other places where Mrs. Kane was on there, and that's the school committee handbook protocol and the contract negotiations with the administrative assistants.
Right.
Happy to fill those if nobody else wants them.
bank.
And she was on the sick bank as well, yeah. And the sick bank,
Sick
not,
bank is,
yeah.
it meets infrequently, and when it does, they're very good meetings.
I can do
Nate, you
that.
want to do that one? Great. All right, and what else that we have outstanding? She was on the admin assistance negotiation team, if I remember correctly. Are we at the point where we need to add somebody? Is it maybe a little late in the process for that? What do we think?
We had a lull in the negotiations, if you will, so
Okay.
that's starting back up
Okay.
soon.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it'd be fine if we want to add something.
It's fine. Does anybody have any interest in joining that negotiation team? Most of the meetings are late afternoon.
3 o'clock, 3:30.
Right after school, okay.
How often? Is it like once a week or depends?
It varies, yeah, it varies depending on the availability of Dr. Brand, myself, Mr. Ragsdale's on it, and then the administrative assistants and their representative.
I can do it.
All right, if you can do
No
that?
one else wants it?
Awesome. Okay, thank you, Mrs. Newhouse. And then the other item was the handbook and the protocol. I know we've got Mrs. Bryson and Mr. Ragsdale working on protocols, so.
Does he want that? I'll take that if David doesn't want that.
And I did notice when Mrs. Newhouse and I were sitting together with the school committee handbook, we have lots of updates we need to make in that, just as far as names and contact information. You are awesome, thank you. Yep, understood.
Mr. Ragsdale?
Hmm?
Do you want that? I'm happy to do it, but I don't want to be a, I don't know what the word
You want to do a subcommittee
I don't want to
hug?
be a hog. I'll do it. But I'm happy to do it.
Going once, going twice. All right,
All right, I'll do it.
all right. Mrs. Bryson is going to be on handbook and protocol. But I expect Mr. Ragsdale to help you finish up the protocols first.
I'm sure you will.
All righty. I think we are all set with subcommittees. Everybody good on those at this point? Awesome. Okay, Public comment. All right, I'm hearing crickets. Okay. Under other reports, do we have any subcommittee reports? You know, we might have had a little bit of a lull over the summer.
So I see you've got the auditorium dedication subcommittee
Yes.
update.
Yeah.
MJ and I are on that subcommittee.
Great.
I was out of town, the only meeting that we've had, although the report I got was that it was quite productive, and we are in the process of scheduling another one.
Awesome, okay,
There is another, if I may, the next meeting is this Friday.
okay. All right, great, so progress is being made.
Progress is being made.
That's great, that's exciting. Okay, any other subcommittee reports? No, it was kind of quiet over the summer. Any correspondence? I know Mrs. Burns was unable to be here. I think she's maybe still on vacation. No? Okay, I did get one item. It's a couple of months old now, but I will share it. It's from NESDEC that helped us with the superintendent's search. And it's just correspondence to my attention from Dr. Bentoncourt, letting us know that they would be in touch with you. And I assume since July they have been.
They have.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe
it's-
they're looking for their invoice to be paid.
that too. That too. And it's just, they were very happy to work with us. They wish us continued success. So that's an easy one. Any other correspondence? Did anybody have? Any other community notes that they want to share, input that they think might be helpful to our school community? I was just,
Mention that, I was gonna say, you're gonna mention.
yeah, I was just going to give a plug for the Wilmington Public Library. They have put forth a month-long initiative to raise awareness on the importance of engaging in civil conversations. And they have a nice brochure that they've put together on various events to revive civility. So I think this is a great opportunity. I know they have a very good website where they will list all the various opportunities that they share. And I believe the Board of Selectmen is calling the month of September about civility. Okay, promoting civility. Dr. Brand?
If I just may add, and I'm thankful that you raised that. Two, I guess, things. It sounds like a great program, and there is talks that in a way are plans that are unfolding to have that speaker come and address some portion of the student body here at the high school next Thursday. So that's something that's being coordinated from the high school level. Unfortunately, it's not possible to hold that presentation here that evening because it's back to school night, I believe, at the high school. So because of that, my understanding is it's being held at the library, limited to approximately, I think, 90 or so guests or participants. But I did, because we have a line of communication here at the high school as those plans are developing for the, I actually did reach, I had the assistant principal reach out to see if we by chance could film the presentation. It depends on the speakers for these kind of things, so
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's going to be possible, but it sounds like an incredibly important and powerful conversation, and so if by chance we could film it, that would be wonderful, but I don't know where that stands right now, so.
Okay, great. Great. Anything else to share? No? Okay, well, I think at this point, we've reached one of our favorite agenda items, and that is the opportunity to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, is there a second? Mr. Bjork, thank you. All those in favor? That would be unanimous. Thank you very much, folks, and have a good evening.